Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG show for Tuesday, November the 10th, 2020. Well, I'm feeling pretty good about the results of the American election. I feel that something new, something big, something important is coalescing in the United States. What was that song? What, the 1980s? We're not going to take it. I believe that's how it went. And that's the feeling that I'm getting. But let's start with the Drudge Report, which has been pointed out is these days no different from CNN. The world moves on. And that is a reference to Donald J. Trump, Professor Dr. Donald J. Trump. And there's a picture of him looking stern or sad or defeated. Ivana says he's not a good loser. Bitter Donald blocks cooperation on transition. Officials fear he could reveal nation's secrets. Russian state media mulls how to take advantage before he's gone. Cold War, Melania refusing to meet with Jill. That is Dr. Jill to you, Matt Drudge. Oh, wait a minute. I thought Melania was going to divorce Trump, like imminently. Growing discontent at law firms representing president. Oh, I see. So this would be the first example in history of law firms saying, yes, we have a very expensive client here who wants a lot of work done, but no, we're not going to do that work because it would be unethical, immoral. A single Nevada case shows futility of effort to reverse election result. Trump supporter files restraining order against Biden supporting neighbor. Did you see that video of a man with a Biden sign on his lawn being harassed, threatened by BLM supporters? That's quite a coalition they got there, isn't it? I'm looking at the Real Clear Politics map. And we see, it's at Biden-Harris 259, Trump-Pence 214. The Senate, Democrats at 48, Republicans at 49. The House, the Democrats at 216, down 5. The Republicans 204, up 6. Governors, Democrats at 23, down 1, and Republicans at 27, up 1. So on this map, Alaska still has not been called for Trump. Arizona is not been called. Georgia has not been called. North Carolina has not been called. And Pennsylvania, the big one, has not been called. From Breitbart, Kyle Olson today. Joe Biden told reporters on Tuesday that it is an embarrassment that President Trump has not yet conceded the election. While the media has declared Biden the president-elect, several battleground states, including Georgia, Pennsylvania, Arizona, and Nevada, are still counting and reanalyzing ballots and counting procedures. RCP lists Biden, as noted just a moment ago, with 259 electoral votes, 17 short of the 70 needed to capture the presidency. CNN has Biden with 279, while Fox News, which is the implacable enemy, leader of the right-wing conspiracy, is more robust, awarding Biden 290 votes. The only thing that, how I can say this tactfully, I think it will not help the president's legacy, Biden said. He went on to acknowledge that he's held discussions with foreign leaders and they are hopeful that the United States democratic institutions are viewed once again as being strong and endured. Oh, I see. So he's decided to stick the needle in there a little deeper. See, when Trump won in 2016, it was completely illegitimate. He wasn't the real president. The election was stolen by Trump acting as the puppet of Vladimir Putin, but to even suggest that there were electoral hijinks, significant ones, in this election, and that the Democrats might have stolen outrageous. Biden added that he thinks Trump supporters are ready to unite. Wrong-o. No, Trump is getting extraordinary support from his voters. I believe we can pull the country out of this bitter politics we've seen the last 5, 6, 7 years, he said, apparently lumping the Obama-Biden years in with the Trump years. Okay. This is from Larry Schweikert. Some indicators that the wackadoodle libs are very concerned this election will be overturned. Today's memo went out, emphasized that people within the Trump campaign or close to the Trump campaign or even lawyers in the recount effort are urging Trump to concede. If you speak liberal, you will know what they are really saying. Given that the establishment media, Washington Post, New York Times, CNN, and all the rest have been lying without respite about Donald Trump for 5 years, why would they expect anyone but the most loyal Biden supporters to believe anything they say? Anything at all. Back to Schweikert. The translation is, damn it, Trump may flip some of those states back. We've got to stop him before he gets one, because when he gets one, he may get 2 or 3, then we're done. To that end, yesterday's meeting between Barstool and Yertle, I was referring to Bill Barr, and Mitch McConnell was very important. There was a significant change in Yertle's attitude from last week when he was saying in Yertlese, we can work with Biden. Now, all of a sudden, it's a bunch of rich elites don't call who our president is, and every vote must be fairly counted. I did not have a spy in that room, but I'd bet my autographed photo of me and Michael W. Smith that the conversation went something like this. Barr: Senator, we are finding significant evidence of fraud in Wisconsin, Michigan, Georgia, and Pennsylvania. At the very least, this will affect 3 of your Senate seats. There is a chance the Michigan race may be overturned. Just thought you should know. Probably as Barr headed out the door, he pulled a Columbo. Oh, and just one other thing. If they can steal an election from the President of the United States, what chance do you think David Perdue has in this special election? Just throwing that out. One more piece of evidence in deciphering liberalese. Today, Biden's team was whining about the transition, that it was going smoothly. Translation: there is no transition. They aren't giving us a foothold anywhere. Now, I'm not giving up or in any way saying Trump won't be successful, but if in the end he doesn't pull this out, he should leave behind a smoking hulk for the Democrats to take over. I wouldn't brief them on one single thing not required by law. Ever see Charlie Wilson's War? Remember the briefing Tom Hanks got from the station chief in Pakistan? Basically nothing. That should be the briefing to Biden. Hand him a quantum physics kit with no directions. Trump should pardon everybody and his brother, set my people free. Again, though, we are a long way from that. And based on the chatter of the hoax news getting further every day from a Biden presidency, we'll see how good a translator I am. This is from Glenn Greenwald at his Substack. Obama official Ben Rhodes admits Biden camp is already working with foreign leaders, exactly what Flynn did. 2 weeks after Donald Trump won the 2016 election, the president-elect named General Michael Flynn to be his national security advisor in both the transition and the new administration. Flynn, who had previously served as President Obama's director of the Defense Intelligence Agency and then campaigned for Trump, quickly got to work in his new position by reaching out to his counterparts in foreign governments, as is customary for national security transition officials. One of the calls made in late December was to Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak after the Obama administration had imposed a series of sanctions on Moscow in response to pressure to punish the Russians for interference in the 2016 election, including the expulsion of diplomats. General Flynn, fearful of an excessively retaliatory response from Moscow that could provoke what he saw as unnecessary confrontation, particularly given the growing anti-Russian sentiment in the U.S., sought to persuade the Russians that there was no need for them to retaliate because the new administration, which was only 3 weeks away from taking over, would reset its relations with Moscow and try to forge a more constructive engagement. Flynn's efforts were successful. Russian President Vladimir Putin announced on December 30th, 2016, that they would not expel diplomats in response. It is customary for post-election transition officials to work with their counterparts in foreign governments to lay the groundwork for relations with the new administration. As the Washington Post said about Flynns Call, it would not be uncommon for incoming administrations to interface with foreign governments with whom they will soon have to work. Despite its normalcy, Flynns Call, which was recorded by the NSA that had been targeting Russian officials, prompted the FBI, under the leadership of then-Director James Comey and Deputy Director Andrew McCabe, to decide to criminally investigate Flynn's conversations with Kislyak. Although the mid-2016 FBI investigation into Flynn's possible corrupt connections to Moscow had been ordered closed for lack of evidence, the FBI manufactured a possible ground of criminality to justify its investigation of Flynn for this call, namely possible violations of the Logan Act. And I'm scratching every time the Logan Act comes up. It's customary to mention that has anyone never been used to prosecute anyone? As Greenwald says, almost certainly unconstitutional and has been ignored, properly so, in countless more blatant cases. Such as when then House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi undermined Bush administration policy to isolate Syrian leader Bashar al-Assad for helping Iraqi insurgents kill U.S. troops in Iraq by visiting Assad in 2007, infuriating the Bush White House. But Flynn's ordinary call with the Russian ambassador became the pretext for further abuse of FBI and NSA powers as part of the security state's ongoing efforts to interfere in the 2016 election and then sabotage the Trump administration before it even began. And of course, the Flynn case is still ongoing, with the judge in charge, Sullivan, refusing to acknowledge that the DOJ has dropped its prosecution of Flynn. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. They make their own rules. And as the 2020 election demonstrates, there's no point in seeking good relations with people who make up their own rules. Also, people who announce blithely that they intend to destroy you, that no opposition is licit and can be permitted. From the Washington Post yesterday, and it took 4 people to write this story, Amy Gardner, Ashley Parker, Josh Dawsey, and Emma Brown. Top Republicans back Trump's efforts to discredit election results, or there'd be a different way of putting this, to fight stolen election. Yes. So we have Barr and we have McConnell and other GOP officials also rushed to bolster Trump's case. But never mind that. Behind the scenes, according to the Washington Post, Trump advisors and allies are increasingly resigned to a Biden victory, according to people familiar with internal discussions who, like others interviewed for this report, spoke on the condition of anonymity to share private conversations. They're doing exactly what they did in Russiagate and Ukrainegate, which is they have a bunch of people lying to them, and then they print these lies, and then the people who lied to them say, well, look, it's true. Why is it true? Because it's appearing in the Washington Post. It is appearing in the New York Times et al. This was pretty funny. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, was asked about transition to the new administration. Pompeo said at a State Department news conference, there will be a smooth transition to a second Trump administration. He later sought to assure the world that America's post-election transition would be successful. This is from Reuters. We're going to count all the votes. The world should have every confidence that the transition necessary to make sure that the State Department is successful today and successful when the president who's in office on January 20th, a minute after noon, will also be successful. I see that the Never Trumpers, they seem worried. Bill Kristol tweeted today, and he was quoting David Frum, Pope Pius of the neocons. That's a little translingual joke there. Quote, if conservatives become convinced that they can't win democratically, they will not abandon conservatism. They will reject democracy. So says Pope Pius. Well, democracy, as understood by Bill Kristol and David Frum, is a rigged casino wherein the neocons always win and the bombs never stop falling on Afghanistan. Let's see, this is from Mediaite. Following Attorney General William Barr's decision to authorize the Department of Justice to probe any, quote, substantial allegations, unquote, of alleged voter fraud in the 2020 election, a top DOJ official left his post overseeing the investigation. The New York Times reported Monday that Justice Department official Richard Pilger, who was slated to aid in the vote fraud initiative, stepped down from the post within hours of Barr's directive. Pilger, a career prosecutor in the department's public integrity section, who oversaw voting fraud-related investigations, told colleagues he would move to a non-supervisory role working on corruption prosecutions. Is that how it works at the DOJ? They get to choose their own jobs? Oh, and this story from Mediaite doesn't mention that Richard Pilzer, who is a pillar of integrity, was integral to Lois Lerner's going after the Tea Party and other conservatives on phony IRS charges when Obama was president. Yes, indeed, a pillar of integrity. This is from National File. NBC reporter freaks out amid confirmation that Trump won North Carolina. Ken Dillian has attributed a profane honor outburst that coincided with Tuesday's breaking news that Trump won the state of North Carolina to some technical difficulties and the perils of playing producer, cameraman, and tech support all at the same time from home. Viewers of MSNBC were caught off guard when Dillian did not respond to a question from host Craig Melvin and instead appeared to look down at his phone several times and become visibly alarmed. I'm going to quote exactly what he said and not Baudelarize it. Oh shit, fuck. That is funny. And of course, Melvin, the host, was thoroughly nonplussed. The camera quickly cut away from Dillian and back to Melvin, who was caught in a momentary loss for words before saying, okay. Let's go to the chat, see what is happening there. SB says, have you all started listening to Christmas music? Oh, please, 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 please. It's November the 10th. Really. It used to be the start of the Christmas season was the day after American Thanksgiving. But no, I saw people, I was in the mall today and I saw people dressed up like elves, women in a store, clerks, and they had, it said, what is it, Santa Squad on their blazers. Twisted Sister, says Jonathan Pohl. Yes, indeed. Of course, the singer of that band has become a thoroughgoing shitlib. I remember when he took on Al Gore, because when Al Gore was holding hearings into what profanity and such like in popular music, I think he called John Denver, or it was someone like that. And Al Gore told John Denver that he was very much an admirer of his music. And then Frank Zappa, I know that name for certain. And there's a lot of poo-poo pee-pee stuff in Frank Zappa's records. I've always found him puerile. But he began, Al Gore did, by telling Frank Zappa how very much he admired his music. And then when Dee Snider of Twisted Sister was about to testify, he preempted Gore by saying, I hope you're not going to tell me how much you admire my music. I thought that was quite clever of him. Chocokin666 listening to Charpentier now, Te Deum. That's good. MCT, goodness, a KMG show sans warning banners. Matt Beck says, I'm kind of tired of all these so-called rightists crowing about how they predicted the Biden-Harris thievery and resting on their rather pathetic laurels talk about cuckery. Yo Mama says, I'm trying to avoid Christmas music until the Advent fast starts on Sunday. It's a problem. It's a problem in our secular countries that December is party month. You've got your office parties, all these other parties, and all these festivities and jollying going on. And of course, to Christians, it's Advent, which is a penitential season. But it's difficult to observe Advent. I suppose Advent is most associated with those calendars that contain chocolates. Jonathan Ferguson says Fox News is controlled opposition like Rebel Media. I don't want to talk about Rebel Media for obvious reasons. I'll just say that Tucker Carlson certainly put a flea in the ear of Fox News yesterday when he condemned his own network for cutting off the President of the United States, for cutting off the press secretary of the President of the United States. He said that Americans should have the ability to hear this. And then, of course, Fox News can come in later with its fact check. Let's see. William Hicks says, read that top DOJ fraud investigator. Pilger resigned. Yes. He could have said there was no cause, but chose to leave instead. Then maybe he knows something. Trump supporters are willing to unite around locking up Joe Biden for corruption and treason. Yes, I believe they are. David Wright says, just how well did Obama's people brief Trump when he took office, betting little to none. I guess you've all seen the famous picture of the Obama staffers at the White House. Was this on Inauguration Day or close to that? And they all looked like they were weeping or close to weeping. Anron says, I loved Cruz humming that little weasel McCabe today. They haven't stolen the election from Trump yet. Never surrender. And it's too early to surrender. I've seen people argue that slow rollout is best for Trump, because the longer this goes on, the more evidence will accrue of fraud, of outrageous fraud, and not only outrageous fraud, but really stupid fraud that is obviously going to be caught. SB on Twitter, they're saying that only 3% of U.S. adults think that Trump won the election. 3%? Is that a typo, SB? Because that's obviously not true. Chocokin666, the media are trying to meme an election result, and they can try all they want, but as we know, these people are not good at memes. They tried this meme about the country uniting. Yes, it's time for calm. It's time for putting aside partisan grievances, and I guess they didn't bother to tell AOC and Jennifer Rubin and the rest about this. Jake Tapper, I'll get into that shortly. Metal Mike says Barr will not do a good job with this. He succumbed to pressure from Trump, but he will choose to find nothing. Well, I don't know. Because the problem is that these assumptions are made about people like Bill Barr, and we don't really know what he's doing, what he is saying. Mike F. says, infuriating to reflect on how Obama weaponized the IRS to win in 2012, then intel agencies to sabotage Trump in 2016, but he skates, assumed to be amazingly scandal-free. Well, we'll see whether he skates. Just to have him announced as an unindicted co-conspirator, I think would play havoc with his legacy. By the way, when you ever hear people talking about a political legacy, you're talking with weak people. Weak people. I mean, this has been made, it was made great fun of in Armando Iannucci's The Thick of It, where the outgoing prime minister, he has to set up his legacy. And then, oh no, he's, forced to quit early, but now the legacy has been brought up. You can't manufacture a legacy. A legacy is something which comes about afterwards. You have no control over it. What is Barack Obama's legacy? The deal with Iran, Obamacare, and of course, Obamacare is not Obama's legacy, because I don't know how many months was it after it was passed that they stopped calling it Obamacare and they started calling it the Affordable Care Act because they knew that it was poison. Anrun says, blackpilling, but a legit concern with a swamp creature like Barr. Well, Barr is a swamp creature. This is his second go-round at Attorney General. And that's one of the reasons why I have some hope in him, because he actually knows how Washington works. Metal Mike, that red light is not working for you, KMG. Well, yeah. Okay, let's see if there's anything we can do about this. Just hang on for a second here. Is that any better? Perhaps a little bit. Now this, better or worse? Perhaps a little worse. I'll just turn that down. I'll give my final adjustment for the time being. Okay. Yeah, the problem here is that it's not only the shift to standard time, but also the fact that this is the rainy season here in Greater Vancouver. And earlier, back in August, when I moved here, I was glorying in the sunshine with the picture windows here, but now there is no sun. Pompey was very base, says Alex Delarge. I like the confidence there when he says that there will be a smooth transition to a second Trump administration. The puce is loose. Yes. Happy birthday to the Marine Corps, says Head McNeck Semper Fi. Enron says, I never understood how anyone could like Zappa. I've known Zappa fans. I've known fanatical Zappa fans because, I don't know, because he's a musical genius, one of the great composers of the 20th century, the greatest guitarist, electric guitarist ever. Again, I find his stuff absolutely puerile. And, I understand that when you're in high school, I don't know, particularly in the 1950s, when Zappa was in high school, or the early 60s, that this pee-pee poo-poo stuff would have been thought radical. But he was keeping this up into the 70s and 80s. I liked Uncle Meat, says Chogokin666. I think the only thing that I really liked about Frank Zappa was his album covers, particularly Neon Park's Weasels Rip My Flesh. Neon Park went on to, he did a bunch of album covers for Little Feat, particularly their second album, Sailing Shoes, which is one of my very favorite records. Obama's legacy is Michelle lunches for school children, says SB. Indeed. And again, we're hearing all this talk about the Constitution now, and I failed to find in the Constitution where the president's wife gets to be a dictator of American school lunches, or exactly what authority does the federal government of the United States have to nationalize school lunches or even to pay for them? But, we've moved far past that. Far past that. YT, if Trump wins this, all the dimwits celebrating on the streets will think that we stole the election from Biden and will go nuts. Let them go nuts. They'll have to deal with federal troops, especially since Espy has been fired. The chimp house will go to 11. I think people are quite tired of the chimp outs, especially when these Biden supporters are finding the people on the left are finding out that the fact that they are white condemns them. That's all that it takes. Obama phone. Don't you mean Obama foam? Says Jay Smith. Metal Mike, Manitoba is closing all non-essential businesses. Thoughts? Has the premier fled to Costa Rica, which seems to be his actual home? Yes, I'm going to be talking about the madness going on in Canada shortly. Mike F. says Obama legacy, first farcically unearned Nobel Peace Prize. Yeah. Pompeo is dark horse for 2024, says Mike F. Wow. Yeah, Frank Zappa. It just, if you have a cult, if you have a really serious cult, I mean, that can take you through. Because how many records? I mean, he made, what, 2 or 3 dozen during his life, and something close to about 50 or 60 records have been released since he died. Okay, Dan Allison, only in it for the money. I think you need to be a guitarist to appreciate people like Zappa, Steve Vai, Joe Satriani. I don't like Steve Vai and Joe Satriani. I don't like shredders. You know, I appreciate the technique. What happened to Moon Unit, Zappa says Oscar Toe? Well, she's currently in an exceedingly bitter legal battle with her siblings, her brother, Ahmet, versus the others, because she's been pretty much cut out of the will. Yo Mama says, KMG, what do you think of the Grateful Dead? Not a fan. Not a fan. I remember years ago, this fellow I worked with, he was a serious musician. He was a choral singer who, you know, actually made recordings. And the subject of Jerry Garcia came up, and I said, look, I don't want to go and watch somebody play scales on stage. And he was just furious. He said, he wasn't playing scales. And when Jerry Garcia died, when I was working at Alberta Report in Edmonton, that David Sharamata, who is a very amusing fellow, we knew that Paul Bunner, who was the executive editor, was a fan of Jerry Garcia. And so David Sharamata, for several hours that day, was just going, it's just very, very funny. Contracu says, get an LED webcam ring light. Some of them have an adjustable hue and are diffused to prevent glare. They cost like $20. Okay, yes, that is an excellent idea. LED webcam ring light. Just write that down right now. Okay. Everything is about rock when guitarists are considered. Roy Clark, Glenn Campbell were great. They were great. Of course, Glenn Campbell played on a great many rock hits. Kind of understand the Dead, but why the need for Fish? Well, hasn't Fish, like they played a whole Velvet Underground album? Apparently, you know, they play all sorts of different kinds of music. Okay, let's go back to it here. Oh, let's talk about specifics. Oh, no. Let's talk about the Attorney General of Michigan. They've got that mad woman, Gretchen Whitmer, the governor. The Attorney General is a nasty piece of work. You might recall she sent out this hilarious message, an own goal. Stop telling my employees to stop telling them to stick Sharpies up their butt. She actually sent out this message. This is from the Gateway Pundit. Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel sent a cease and desist letter to Big League Politics about their exclusive content Detroit Leaks that outlined poll worker training wherein workers were bragging about committing voter fraud in a variety of different ways. The intrepid reporter who broke this story, Shane Trejo, was also one who was a witness for the voter fraud in Detroit. Trejo says he considers this witness intimidation and is fearful that it will be used as pretext for some criminal actions. In a shocking letter dated October 28th, the Michigan Attorney General cites 2 or 3 factual errors in the bulk of Trejo's reporting and demands on behalf of the Michigan government to take every single article related to Detroit leaks off the internet. The reporting showed how Detroit poll workers were trained how to lie, trained on how to handle ballot challenges for Trump supporters, told to call 911 on any challengers and to use COVID as an excuse to deny poll challengers access to view the ballots as they were being counted and tabulated. The series of leaks also revealed that even challenged ballots would be processed as regular ballots. Incoming State Representative Steve Carra and Michigan activist Bob Cushman filed a successful lawsuit against Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson over the explosive allegations that poll workers were being trained in how to commit voter fraud. This information was previously banned from YouTube, Twitter, and other social media platforms. Again, from the Gateway Pundit, this is from Joe Hoft last night. We've reported on numerous events identified in the 2020 election already, which are being referred to as glitches by the Democrats. Tonight, we just uncovered another glitch. When this one is confirmed, it will result in a 19,500 vote gain for Trump, making the Wisconsin race a total toss-up. There is now a pattern of events we have uncovered across the country where votes are being taken from Republicans at all levels and transferred to competing Democrats in offsetting amounts. These are not random because in every case, votes are moved from Republicans to Democrats. This is beginning to appear like a strategy used by the Democrats to steal this election. We first reported on a system glitch, as it was labeled, in Michigan, which switched 6,000 votes to President Trump. I believe it was Jay Valentine who pointed out that there's no such thing as glitches. The software does what it is instructed to do until it's instructed to do something else. That's how it works. Oh, yes, this was new to me. So we know about the dead. We know about the hundreds of thousands of dead who voted in the election, including people who were born in 1900. A great many people born in 1900, which would make them 120 years old. This is from Vox Day. We may have an explanation for that strong support for Democrats on the part of single white women. This is a quote here. My mom literally got her vote stolen in Michigan. They moved, and she just now thought to tell me about it. Fraud. Voter fraud, and I can prove it. All I can say while I'm getting this together, if your parents live in a different state, and if there was a legal name change that happened before they moved, check their voter status. Her legal last name changed as they moved. I've independently verified that women have cast votes in their own name, and another vote was cast under their maiden name. Now provided a small team to a woman. The woman calls herself @SomeBitchIKnow, and a channel to Trump campaign and law enforcement tomorrow to get these victims and voters justice. Because we already know that there are nearly 2 million more registered voters than eligible citizens. On Monday, a report was issued indicating that among 353 U.S. counties, 1.8 million more voters might have been registered than eligible voting age citizens. Judicial Watch revealed the results of their 2020 study showing that the total of the counties of registration rates surpassed 100% of eligible voters. The 8 states where statewide registration rates exceeded 100% included Alaska, Colorado, Maine, Maryland, Michigan, New Jersey, Rhode Island, and Vermont. The fake voters are not all dead, says Vox Day. Many have simply changed their names. This revelation could be a major game changer going forward with effects that extend well beyond President Trump's successful re-election. Yeah, as far as Judicial Watch has been very, very successful in recent years with their lawsuits, various lawsuits against the federal government. Tom Fitton tweets, massive fraud and lawlessness impacting over 2.5 million ballots alleged in Pennsylvania by Donald Trump campaign in historic verified lawsuit. And I'll just read from the beginning of it. American citizens deserve fair elections. Every legal, not illegal vote should be counted. No government power, be it state or federal, may deny American citizens the right to observe the process by which votes are cast, processed, and tabulated. We must protect our democracy with complete transparency. Nothing less than the integrity of the 2020 presidential election is at stake in this action. Defendants, the very officials charged with ensuring the integrity of the election in Pennsylvania, have so mismanaged the election process that no one, not the voters and not President Trump's campaign, can have any faith that their most sacred and basic rights under the United States Constitution are being protected. The evidence is plain that defendants have been and are blatantly violating the protections and procedures, including those enacted by the Pennsylvania General Assembly, vitally necessary to ensure that the votes of the citizens of Pennsylvania are not illegally diluted by invalid ballots and that the election is free and fair. While the bedrock of American elections has been transparency, almost every critical aspect of Pennsylvania's November 3rd, 2020 general election was effectively shrouded in secrecy. Democrat majority counties provided political parties and candidates, including the Trump campaign, no meaningful access or actual opportunity to review and assess mail-in ballots during the pre-canvassing meetings. Allegheny and Philadelphia counties alone received and processed 682,479 mail-in and absentee ballots without review by the political parties and candidates. These are unprecedented numbers in Pennsylvania's elections history. Rather than engaging in an open and transparent process to give credibility to Pennsylvania's brand new voting system, the processes were hidden during the receipt, review, opening, and tabulation of those 682,479 votes in direct contravention of the election code. 10 state attorney generals joined suit against Pennsylvania, where individuals were allowed to vote 3 days after the election. Again, that is from Jim Hoft. The piece here from Steve Cortez at the National Pulse. The statistical case is admittedly circumstantial rather than conclusive. This is the case for ballot fraud, for election theft. But the numbers also firmly point to the intense improbability of the accuracy of the President Biden lead. The statistical case provides more than enough reasonable suspicion to require hand recounts and immediate investigation into fraudulent activities, including the new damning revelations of on-the-record whistleblowers. There are 4 key elements to the numerical thesis. 1, turnout. Clearly, high turnout was expected in an intensely political year with vastly expanded access to mail-in voting. But the kinds of numbers reported simply defy reasonable expectations. For Wisconsin overall, the turnout was above 90% of registered voters. Even in a state with same-day registration, such a number seems implausible. After all, in Australia, a place where voting is mandatory and failing to vote is punishable with stiff fines, the total turnout for the most recent election was still only 92%. Even more importantly, looking within the Wisconsin vote, the decisive locale for Biden was unsurprisingly Milwaukee. Wisconsin's largest city reported an 84% turnout to secure a 146,000 vote lead there for Biden. Consider a comparison to another very similar Midwestern city, Cleveland. Milwaukee has a population of 590,000, 67% minorities. Cleveland has 381,000 people, with 60% of them minorities. But Milwaukee's 84% turnout dwarfs Cleveland's more believable 51% turnout rate. Number 2, outperformance versus Obama. The breakouts higher for Biden relative to Obama's performances in key areas simply do not seem credible. Could a candidate as doddering and lazy as Biden really have massively outpaced the vote totals of a politician who boasted rock star appeal? Consider that in the key Pennsylvania counties of Chester, Cumberland, and Montgomery, Biden bested the Obama election performances by factors of 1.24 to 1.43 times. In 2020, Biden won Montgomery County by a whopping 131,000 votes, more than twice the prior Obama margin. 3. Biden-only ballots. Trump campaign legal counsel Sidney Powell reports that nationwide over 450,000 Biden-only ballots were cast, meaning the voter allegedly selected Biden but then neglected down-ballot candidates, including closely contested Senate and House races. Again, this phenomenon appears far more prominently in battleground states, raising the alarm for manipulation. Why would so many people vote Biden only in battleground Georgia but not in deeply red Wyoming, for instance? Number 4, absence of mail-in vote vetting. Democratic governors clamored for massive amounts of mail-in voting, knowing full well that most states would be overwhelmed and wholly unable to establish the validity and legality of almost all of the votes that poured in via mail. In the case of Pennsylvania, Governor Wolf made such changes unilaterally in stark violation of Pennsylvania law and in contradiction of the clear U.S. constitutional assignment of voting regulatory authority to state legislatures, not governors. Governor Wolf's election boards clearly just accepted the ballots en masse without appropriate vetting. By their own admission, the scant 0.03% of rejected ballots represents a refusal rate that is just 1/30th the level of 2016 in Pennsylvania. And you will recall 2 or 3 weeks before the election, there was this panic on the left, which is why we saw Chelsea Handler and Sarah Silverman get their kid out, yet again, talking about naked ballots. The conclusion here, the statistical case in isolation does not prove fraud, but the confluence of highly unlikely results does emphatically paint a picture of utter improbability. Any one of those 4 factors alone would cast intense doubt upon election results. Put all 4 together, and the result is a seemingly impossible, statistically perfect form. To use a sports analogy, it would be a team pitching a perfect game in the World Series, not 1 game, not 2, but in all 4 games to sweep via pitching perfection. Yes, but I was talking yesterday, this isn't my observation, it was someone else's. The difference between common sense proof and legal proof. And Trump is going to have to find legal proof. The excellent Daniel Greenfield at Front Page writes, the plan was simple. Saturate the media with polls showing a blue wave and an inevitable victory. Discourage people from voting in person, and then, after tabulating the paltry votes of those who defied the media to vote in person, dump all the tampered, altered, and harvested ballots for Biden in key cities. Even before Election Day, the Democrats knew their plan was going awry. Suddenly, instead of urging their base to use mail-in ballots, they were just as loudly telling them to vote in person. Why? Too few Republicans were voting by mail, and too many were going to vote in person. If the Election Day numbers tilted too decisively to President Trump before suddenly going Biden's way, the election would look rigged and there would be an outcry from Republicans. Despite last-minute efforts urging Democrats to vote in person, that's exactly what happened. Once again, Democrats had overreached, committed a massive crime, and have been left with no choice except to ride the tiger. That's what happened last time when the Obama administration allied with the Clinton campaign to eavesdrop on its political opponents and then doubled down with investigations and indictments, not of the perpetrators, but of the victims. Despite the blatant irregularities in key battleground states, they're doubling down again. The American coup is underway. In classic Leninist fashion, its initial goal is to control the propaganda and the process. The media has declared Biden to be the winner, while mass celebratory gatherings cheer the new order. Big tech censors any skepticism about the election. And the same faction that declared 4 years ago that casting doubt on an election was patriotic and the best defense of democracy now claims exactly it's treason. The only Democrat rule is that it's patriotic when they do it and treason when their opponents do it. That's not how Democrats think. That's how dictators rule. Jay Valentine, who I have praised in this space several times over the last few days, has a column in the American Thinker today. What would George Patton do? Patton was the master of offense. Never sit still, always attack, keep your enemy off balance. Translated to the current situation, we see the Trump team collecting every piece of evidence possible showing massive voter fraud. Lots of pieces, it appears. People are showing up with their phone photos of election workers covering windows so Republicans cannot see in. This week, the litigation starts. That's an offense of sorts. While that is critical, it fails in one key respect. These lawsuits have antidotes. The other side shows up, and they're in the bag. Media panels gaslight America with one story after another about how some fraudulent act was just a process error. Happens all the time. So what would George Patton do? He would look for the aggressive move against which there is no defense, no antidote, no counterpunch, and he would give it all he's got. Translation: pack up the sandwiches, get Mark Levin, Sean Hannity, the Trump kids, gather some of the fraud witnesses, bring Rudy along aboard Air Force One, and hit the road. Trump and the team go to each of the 6 or 7 states where Biden leads with clearly fraudulent votes. It's rally time. The rally is an appeal to the tens of thousands who show up. I'm Donald Trump, and I'm here because your legislature has to certify fake votes. I think that is BS. Only he says it, the crowd goes wild. You cannot let them certify fraud or we lose our country. You get the rest. Now, Trump has changed every dynamic in this race. It's about certifying clear fraud or not. Are you in or out, Ms. State Legislator? Remember, every one of these legislatures has 2 houses and both are Republican. Even if one of these chambers, there are 12 to 14 chambers in 6 or 7 states, says no, the Electoral College votes do not go to Biden. The matter goes to the House of Representatives. Trump wins. Trump fires up the big screen TVs showing videos of Democratic poll workers boarding up windows. A formerly anonymous poll watcher tells her story, clearly unrehearsed, of how she witnessed massive vote tampering. Get Mark Levin fired up, and he delivers a constitutional law lesson on why taking this to the legislature is exactly what the founders intended. Welcome to Electoral College 101. Trump attacks Fox News and adds them to the fake news people in that now famous back row with the red lights. The crowd goes even wilder. Who wants to be the Republican state legislator who voted yes to massive voter fraud? Here's the important part, the Patton part, so pay attention. There is no antidote from the left. Do you think the Antifa boys are going to try and mess up the hair of 50,000 people at a Trump rally in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Arizona? They don't even know where those places are. When Mitt Romney and Ben Sass scream that Trump is a dictator, and they will, Donald J. Trump responds that he is simply following the Constitution. Is that a problem? When Trump and the poll workers show a fraud example on those big screens, do you really think 50,000 people are going to look at their phones, Google a Facebook fact checker to see if it's true? The mainstream media will lose its mind. Wild is just not descriptive enough. There needs to be a better, more colorful adverb. What can they do? Yes, in case you're thinking, wait a minute, the Democrats are ahead in the House of Representatives, and they lost, 6 seats? They're still ahead. In the next one, that's not how it works. It goes by state, not by the total number of members of the House of Representatives. I alluded to this yesterday, but here's more from the Canadian press. The current president of the United States has warranted nary a mention from Prime Minister Justin Trudeau since Democrat Joe Biden became president-elect on Saturday. While that might be setting Trudeau and Canada up for some retaliatory pain from Donald Trump, analysts are divided on how much misery even a very vindictive lame duck president could inflict on his closest neighbor. Of course, there's no consideration in this story that maybe Biden's not going to win. The Prime Minister's office released a statement congratulating Biden within 45 minutes of multiple news outlets having called the Democrats' pivotal victory in Pennsylvania. Bessa Momani, an international affairs expert at the University of Waterloo, says Trump is likely keeping track of who is congratulating Biden. She said there is no ruling out that Trump could find a way to retaliate against Canada in his remaining time in the Oval Office. But yes, and it mentions the smooth transition to a second Trump administration. It would have been prudent of Justin Trudeau to hold back, to make a statement to say, well, when the Electoral College votes, then I will send a swift congratulation to the winner. But Justin Trudeau is not a prudent man. So we are going to have a rally in Washington, D.C. Whoa, whoa, whoa. More light, Marilyn. Oh, man. This is terrible. How about this? No, is that even worse? Oh, you can see the background. Ooh. That Adam Hart Mother effect. Let's see. Let's go back to the chat here. Biden will cancel the Keystone Pipeline, which Trudeau purports to support. Yes, this has already been reported that Biden has promised to cancel this. Now, this is, obviously in terms of Canada as a whole and Alberta in particular, Trump would be the candidate because the Keystone Pipeline is vitally important to the oil industry in Canada, but Trudeau hates the oil and gas industry and he wants them to die. Mr. Marvel says the last time I watched him, he kept playing that Richard Spencer rant and saying absolutely every 5 seconds. Okay. He also removed them from his blog. Rather shameful. Some of those were classics and hate great book clubs, theater, Thursdays. Guess they're gone forever. Really? Oh, but the videos themselves have been removed or just the linkages to them? Chad Chadson, Luke said that he deleted them to protect his channel. What, my book reviews and my movie reviews, were they particularly controversial? Were my comments about Bill and Ted too spicy? Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. But as Michelangelo wrote, everything that is created must perish. Yeah, okay. All of the videos I did, deleted. Wow. Okay. YT says KMG's unique lighting struggles is part of the charm. I wish you had the recordings, Kevin, but I'm assuming you don't. You assume correctly. I suppose this gives me an opportunity to talk about the same movies and books again. Speaking of censorship, Jim Hoft again. On Monday, we announced a major march for Trump planned on Saturday, November 14th at noon Eastern in Freedom Plaza. This is a major event that was announced on Monday. The Democrats and their allies and big tech don't want you to hear about this rally. Big tech is censoring this peaceful rally. When was the last time big tech censored a violent rally for Black Lives Matter? And here's a message from Twitter. Warning, this link may be unsafe. This is http://stop-the-steal. The link you were trying to access has been identified by Twitter or our partners as being potentially spammy or unsafe in accordance with Twitter's URL policy. The link could fall into any of the below categories. Malicious links that could steal personal information or harm electronic devices. Pull the other one. It's got bells on. Spammy links that mislead people or disrupt their experience. Wait a minute, I thought disruption was a good thing. I thought disruption was what Silicon Valley was all about. Violent or misleading content that could lead to real-world harm. Certain categories of content that have posted directly on Twitter are a violation of the Twitter rules. Yes, so big rally, Freedom Plaza, 12 p.m., Washington, D.C., Saturday, November the 14th. But I don't know, people might be put out hearing about it. Fox News. I hear they're in big trouble. I hear that their viewers, they're being beaten in the ratings now, by Newsmax, at least part of the day, that a large number of their viewers have fled to Newsmax and, OANN? This is from Newsweek. Maria Bartiromo amasses over 700,000 followers on Parler after leaving Twitter over accusations of censorship. In her initial announcement that she wanted to join Parler, Bartiromo encouraged her Twitter followers to register for their own accounts so they could continue following her posts. She's continued posting on Twitters in the days since, but she added her Parler handle to several of those posts to remind followers of where else they could find her. It's up to 727,000 followers by Monday afternoon. The Mornings with Maria host's decision to leave Twitter came after the platform flagged some of the content she posted following Election Day with a message that read, quote, "Some or all of the content shared in this tweet is disputed and might be misleading about an election or other civic process," unquote. Again, disputed? Oh, so Twitter only publishes tweets that are not disputed, that are all certified by some sort of council of elders? No, of course that's not true. Of course that is not true. This is from Tom Pappert at National File. Facebook has banned the personal account and public page of Mark Sidney, the co-founder of Spreely, a new social media site that respects the First Amendment rights of its users to the furthest possible extreme, claiming that the tech startup founder is a, quote, dangerous individual, unquote, or part of a dangerous organization, such as the Islamic State. Is that the next step? That anyone who supports Trump in his bid for re-election, in his bid against election fraud, is a terrorist? Could be. Could be. Let's see what Scott Adams have to say. Do you hear that dog that isn't barking? It's the top statistical experts on the left who are looking at election rigging allegations and coming to a slow boil in their own flop sweat. I believe that every experienced politician knows American elections routinely have baseline fraud because it is easy, and that there is a 100% chance that this time it was more than ever, much more. Rogan O'Handley had tweeted, "You can hear it in Biden's voice, you can hear it in Kamala's voice, you can hear it in every fake news reporter's voice. They know Biden didn't win. They know it's 4 more years of Trump." Well, as far as baseline fraud goes, I've been reading about politics since, 1969? Something like that. And look, this is not a secret. I'm not telling you anything which is not public knowledge, that Republican campaign organizers have been saying for years that they have to win elections by at least 2%. Otherwise, the Democrats will steal them. Again, this isn't really news. It's not really news. Let's see what Banana Republican KG has to say. Lara Logan tweeted, "Republicans flipped 9 seats in California." Captain Barf, that's what he's called, responded, "It's amazing that the most popular presidential candidate in all of U.S. history has no coattails. It's amazing. The Republicans flipped 9 seats in California? California is practically a one-party state. The Republicans don't even have a guaranteed slot on the ballot on election day, which tells me that Joe Biden is spectacularly unpopular." Let's see. Josh Marshall. GOP started humoring Trump, trying to give him time to accept the inevitable, but as he's pushed forward, they're getting more comfortable with the idea of convincing state legislatures to throw out the results of vote and just vote to give Trump the electors. Ha, 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 ha. Aria Kovler had tweeted, "Why does Trump suddenly need the entire Department of Defense leadership purged and replaced by hyper-loyal apparatchiks?" Oh, you're calling the Republicans apparatchiks. A few weeks before he's gone. Is something afoot? Your end approaches, was KG's response. Ryan Brown had tweeted, "Pentagon finally confirms near total decapitation of civilian leadership in the last 24 hours. Secretary of Defense Esper fired Monday the top Pentagon policy official, top Defense Department intelligence official, and chief of staff to the Defense Secretary, all out today." Kurt Schlichter had tweeted, "Why are they so afraid of us finding out about the truth of this election. Surprise, Philadelphia finds another 2,000 ballots a week after Election Day. 97% go to Joe Biden. Let's see what J5 Killer has to say. Posidonius had tweeted, Pennsylvania Democratic Governor, GOP House. Wisconsin Democratic Governor, GOP House. Michigan Democratic Governor, GOP House. Georgia GOP Governor, GOP House. Arizona GOP Governor, GOP House. The three Democratic governors will stall recount audit as long as they can. Georgia, Arizona need to audit ASAP if those audits reflect huge swings to Trump. Other three states in hot water. Yes, at this point, it seems clear that disgraced former VP Joe Biden ought to concede for the sake of unity. Pass it on. Sometimes the good guys win. They're doxing Trump lawyers, says a J5 Killer. Let's see if we can get them removed from Twitter. And apparently the Lincoln Project is in difficulty because of this. The Lincoln Project, they're calling Trump a dictator. That would be the same Abraham Lincoln who instituted habeas corpus during the Civil War, who had, dozens of hundreds of journalists arrested, closed down newspapers, tried to arrest Justice of the Supreme Court, Roger Taney. That Abraham Lincoln? Yes. Is that Abraham Lincoln was not really much of a, what you'd call a laissez-faire type of guy. But obviously he was better than that terrible Donald Trump. Of course, Donald Trump didn't start a war that killed 1 million Americans. But we know that the Democrats and their Never Trump and their neocon friends, they love war. They can't get enough of it. They don't like to fight in them, but they just love it. Jennifer Rubin tweets, one reason Moscow Mitch really, Mitch McConnell, he's the communist, okay, really fits is because Russia for decades has been aiming to discredit democratic reforms. That is precisely what GOP is doing. And she's getting a little scared, Jennifer Rubin, that it seems that this truth and reconciliation, the revenge, has maybe gone a little too far. She tweeted 2 hours ago, I agree and implore my friends at Project Lincoln to knock this off. There are bar authorities and proper means to do this. Do not start a frenzy in an atmosphere in which death threats, unhinged behavior, and verbal assaults are the norm. Stop. Bit late for that now, Jennifer. Jake Tapper tweeted, I truly sympathize with those dealing with losing. It's not easy, but at a certain point, one has to think not only about what's best for the nation, peaceful transfer of power, but how any future employers might see your character defined during adversity. I don't want to say what I think, where I think that Jake Tapper should end up employment-wise, but I think that you could probably guess. Drew Holden tweeted, with Biden having been declared the winner for now by major media outlets, I figured it would be a good time to share some of the people who've threatened retribution against Trump supporters. The list is a lot longer than I had anticipated it would be. It wouldn't be right to start with anyone but Robert Reich, who I'll remind you was Secretary of Labor under Bill Clinton and is here calling for an extra legal prosecution of his political opponents as part of a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. You'd think such an idea was roundly refuted, just one blue check going off the reservation, you would be wrong. Here's MSNBC's Chris Hayes, one of the key voices on one of the largest networks, echoing the same sentiment. The list goes on. There were plenty of blue checks throwing this idea around. Here we have Jeffrey Vagel, Brandon Friedman, Trey Graham. I need you all to take a moment, Drew Holden writes, and appreciate how utterly batshit this thread from Steve Schmidt is. Oh, all of these people who are not yet bowing down to Joe Biden, he writes, they're complicit in the assault on American democracy. None of them should ever be forgiven. All of them should pay a brutal price for betraying the American ideal. You know, I've been saying this for years, but none of these people seem to understand that the standard, okay, you're going to introduce or reintroduce violence into politics, but you think it's only going to go in one direction. It's a foolish assumption. Jamie Lee Curtis, who I understand used to be an actress, is calling for truth and reconciliation. And lots of well-known people. Quinn Cummings calling for truth and reconciliation. In These Times magazine calling for it. Eli Mistal for The Nation. Perhaps my favorite think piece comes from Will Bunch from the Philadelphia Inquirer. Just normal stuff for a major publication to run. Yes, truth and reconciliation. Yeah, make sure these things never happen again. Salon is on board. What? Oh, retired. Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman says he's concerned he'll be targeted for retribution should President Donald Trump win a second term. And he didn't, he's all for truth and reconciliation as well. The latest suggestion was the keeping of lists for anyone who supported the president. A sitting member of Congress, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, demanded one full Bolshevik. And she wasn't alone in her demands. Of course, the Never Trump crew piled on for this one. Here we've got Jennifer Rubin and Evan McMullen. Oh, and the obligatory Kurt Eichenwald mention. Thankfully, for all of them, there's already one in the works. We had the Trump Accountability Project led by Hari Savugin. Yes, to make sure anyone who took a paycheck to help Trump undermine America is held responsible for what they did. Just reported, White House staff are starting to look for jobs. Employers considering them should know there are consequences for hiring anyone who helped Trump attack American values. You know, the Republic of Rome fell into this. The tit-for-tat proscriptions, that you'd have one strong man, one dictator take over, and all of his enemies and his families, they'd be proscribed. And then someone else would take over, and then the people who'd been in charge, they would end up, and their family would end up proscribed. Given that the elite has not had any serious challenges since the 1960s or even the 1950s, I don't think they want to play this game. From Joshua Klein at Breitbart, law firms representing Trump in election lawsuits are under a relentless assault by the Twitter blue check leftist mob, as well as other various anti-Trump personalities and groups which have threatened to blacklist and tarnish the reputation of both the firms as well as their employees and clients. Jonas Day, one of the country's largest law firms, is the most prominent firm representing Trump and the Republican Party as they prepare to wage a legal war challenging the election outcome. As a result, the litigation powerhouse has received a slew of threats in recent days. Chicago Tribune columnist Rex Hupke called for the firm to be dragged through the mud. Quote, firms like Jones Day and any others representing Trump in these outlandish election lawsuits should be dragged through the mud. Their other clients should know how Americans feel about firms willing to undermine our democracy. The PR shitstorm this stirs up should be blinding, unquote. Former Clinton press secretary and CNN political analyst Joe Lockhart called on those represented by Jones Day to let them know how you feel about this. The Lincoln Project and Never Trump Political Action Committee is set to launch a massive digital campaign hammering law firms representing the Trump campaign and targeting clients as well. Oh, and Rick Wilson is involved because, of course, he is. In a highly provocative move, The Lincoln Project PAC, which has nearly 3 million Twitter followers, began publicizing images and contact information of individual attorneys in a recently deleted tweet, encouraging others to make them famous, followed by a skull and crossbones flag. Lincoln Project co-founder and prominent Never-Trumper Rick Wilson endorsed a tweet that read, "Every one of the lawyers who uses Trump in an effort to suppress the vote should be exposed. Their firms should be held accountable. Corporate clients should be asked why they're working with lawyers who are trying to derail democracy. Hold them responsible." Isn't it these kinds of people who are the same people that when some serial killer or some notorious sex pest has a lawyer, how can you represent such scum, especially since, there's 20 eyewitnesses. He's obviously guilty of these terrible crimes. And they say, our Anglo-American legal system means representation, legal representation for everyone. And I'm just doing my job under the system. And of course, they have a point. But in this case, no. They would have more sympathy for serial killers and rapists than for Donald Trump or anyone who voted for him. These are the kinds of people that we are dealing with. And I would say, never forget that. Never forget that. The assumption that that these people share any of our beliefs about fairness, fair play, whatever. No, they do not. They simply do not. Just win, baby. That's what they believe in. Or as Jesse Jackson, who I believe is still a hero of the left, as he famously said, it's not over till it's over, and even then, it's not over. I believe he was also fond of the phrase, by any means necessary. From Breitbart, Senator Marsha Blackburn has responded to an initiative from far-left Democrats and Never-Trump Republicans aiming to target supporters of President Donald Trump by adding them to a list and holding them accountable after the election. Blackburn's remarks were made in a tweet which quoted the announcement of the Trump Accountability Project, with aims to make sure anyone who took a paycheck to help Trump undermine America is held responsible for what they did. If by undermining America you mean stopping democratic socialists, not defunding police, and blocking the Green New Deal, add me to your list, Blackburn wrote, adding the hashtag MAGA. The effort, which was kickstarted on Friday, was promoted by Representative AOC, who wrote in a tweet, quote, "Is anyone archiving these Trump sycophants when they try to downplay or deny their complicity in the future? I foresee decent probability of many deleted tweets, writings, photos in the future," unquote. Okay. Oh, yes. Let's talk about Joy Reid, or Joy Ann Reid, or Joy Ann M. Lomina Reid, known professionally as Joy Reid, according to Wikipedia. Let's see. She was born in 1968 in Brooklyn. Her father was from the Democratic Republic of Congo, and her mother a college professor and nutritionist from Guyana. And in all of these cases, I think she's an anchor baby, isn't she? She is truly one of the stupidest people on television. I still have this kind of prejudice that when I see people on the news, on news programs, on news chat programs, I think, well, they must be smart, because if they weren't smart, why would they be on the news? But Joy Reid is a twofer. So, yeah. You will recall that when a long-term MSNBC employee, I suppose the fellow most associated with that network, that would be Chris Matthews, was punted over what seemed to me to be a rather desperate and flimsy sexual harassment accusation. Joy Reid got the job. Oh, yes. And if you're interested in that kind of thing, the CBS network has announced that 50% of all participants in its reality shows going forward must be non-white. 50%. Joy Reid has been in a lot of controversies. She doesn't seem to like homosexuals. That's putting it mildly. She does not seem to like Israel or Jews. And the most hilarious one was she attacked Donald Trump and his wife, and she made it clear that she didn't know where Slovenia was, and she confused it with Slovakia. She is really a dimwit, but it just gets better and better. This is from Natalie Winters at the National Pulse. I'm looking at a picture of her on the air, and she looks stupid. She looks deeply, deeply stupid. Joy Reid insisted on Twitter that the political polling site 538 exists because 538 was the margin in Florida when the Republican SCOTUS reversed the 2000 election during a recount. She continues using this faulty logic to dispel the chances of the election flipping in favor of President Trump. 538, however, corresponds to the number of electors in the Electoral College. In fact, 538's frequently asked questions page prominently displays a site's founder's rationale for naming the site as linked to the Electoral College. I wonder if you asked Joy Reid or Joy Ann Reid or Joy Ann Lumina Reid how many states there were in the United States, what she would say. How can you be an expert on national politics in the United States and not know there are 538 votes in the electoral college? I wonder if she knows how many members of the House of Representatives there are, or how many senators. It would be fun to ask her. I mean, just to slip it in, to make an outrageous mistake, about how many members of the House there are, or to say, well, of course, there's 120 senators, and then wait for her to say, no, it's not 100. It's not 120. It's 100. I think that would be the best way to do it. Yeah, Joy. I mean, she just looks so stupid. A very sad story from the Los Angeles Times about Lodi, California, which is perhaps the worst place in America. This is a story by Anita Chabria. And it is titled, "In Liberal California, Black Lives Matter protests in some towns meet with scary backlash." Pastor Nelson Rabel Gonzalez knew that livable, lovable Lodi, as locals call it, had a problem when men carrying a noose, sure they were, and baseball bats with American flags attached shouted racial slurs at him in September as he helped lead a peaceful protest in this San Joaquin Valley town. Where are the pics? Where are the pics? I want to see the pictures of the nooses. That's what I want to see. What, you don't have pictures of them? Everyone's got a camera now. Why are there no pictures? When I feel like I'm in Alabama prior to the civil rights movement, said Rabel Gonzalez, an Afro-Caribbean Lutheran minister. Afro-Caribbean? So does he come from the United States? I don't believe that he was in the United States in the 1960s. In past months has planned some of the first racial justice marches to ever take place in this agricultural outpost made famous by a Creedence Clearwater Revival song about a man stuck where he's not appreciated. So, yeah, not very many protests, BLM, in Northern California or Northeastern California, if you will. As allies in this town, you get attacked, says Kat Ellis, an elementary teacher. Kat, K-A-T, not trustworthy. Catherine, sure. Kathy, sure. Katie, sure. Kat, no, not trustworthy. Ellis said that after helping to organize recent events, she was targeted both online and in person, with people calling her a pedophile because her social media profile expressed support for the alphabet people community. The QAnon conspiracy theory, favored by some right groups, associates the plus symbol with a secret code for a fake network of democratic child abusers intent on taking over the government. Doesn't it refer to HIV positive people? Her school district received complaints, demanded she be fired. She said her husband's employer put him on paid leave after customers threatened to pull their business. It was wildfire, Kat Ellis said. My husband and I would be walking around and people would stop and whisper. Then it talks about the wine industry. But Lodi also has a darker reputation, said City Council member Joanne Mounts, a third-generation Lodian. Back in the 1950s, we were not a community that welcomed diversity. Oh, dear. Oh, dear. Near the turn of the century, what century? What century are they talking about? Are they talking about like the year 1999 or the year 1899? Lodi was rumored to be a sundown town where people of color were not welcome after dark. Just after Martin Luther King Jr. Day in 1998, a cross was burned in front of the local high school, pictures please, and its black principal targeted with spray-painted insults. Today, the city is surrounded by a green belt of agricultural lands that some contend is purposefully preserved as a buffer to nearby Stockton, one of the most diverse cities in California, with high rates of homelessness and poverty. Isn't it funny how that works? Because diversity is the bestest thing on earth. And you need to get as much diversity as you can. And effectively, that means as few white people as you can. And yet we see this stubborn connection between diversity and high rates of homelessness and poverty. Less than 2% of Lodi's 65,000 residents, 1,300 are black, according to census data. So I don't know. One wouldn't think that it'd be much of an issue there. Rabel Gonzalez and other criminal justice advocates began organizing shortly after Floyd's death, including the September march in Lodi's quaint downtown. Quaint. That sounds like a dog whistle to me. Which they discussed ahead of time with police. They were met with counter-demonstrators who outnumbered them 3-1. One local counter-protester, his face obscured by a red bandana and a hat, ran a power saw. Well, red bandana, but that's a mask, right? We're all supposed to wear the masks now because of this COVID-19 pandemic. Ran a power saw as marchers went by, though its chain was removed. That is intimidating, said Sierra Brucia, Lodi's police chief. Our officers were out there and they were hearing the N-word and they were hearing references to lynching, Brucia said. No, I don't believe that. I do not believe that. But Vine, or Vinny, I don't know how this is pronounced, it's spelled V-I-N-E, Sanchez, 18, a recent high school graduate, helped plan the protest, called it a very scary and surreal experience. Yes, it was the most tense protest I've been to as an advocate and a leader, and I've been all over the country. Oh, you've been all over the country, have you? That's kind of curious. Who's paying for this, Leah Schenk, the organizer from Sacramento? Who's paying for you to travel across the United States? It was a very large country protesting. That's a question perhaps the LA Times could have asked. Like much of California and the country in the wake of a divisive election and the year of racial upheaval, Lodi is left wondering how to move forward while anger, hurt, and distrust continue to define its public discourse. Rebel Gonzalez said the community has quieted down and he is hopeful because 2 people of color are predicted to win city council seats once final tallies are counted in the recent election. One in the low-income district currently held by Mounts. And let's see if I can find this here. That appear to be some based people there in Lodi. Nearly 40% of the population is Latino, many Mexican farm workers. Bertha Castro Valdez, a school district employee whose parents were farm workers, has been advocating for the Hispanic community for years, as she puts it, one family at a time. She believes that Latinos face persistent discrimination in Lodi and is working with racial justice advocates to bring attention to the issues, or as one might say, shake people down. But you got a problem in Lodi here. According to Castro Valdez, it's so racist, this town, even the Hispanic community has become racist. That's just the worst thing that's ever happened anywhere. Those who become professionals forget the community. This is what this town does to you. They pretend they are from Texas. They don't want to be from Mexico. Well, there have been Hispanics, if you like, in California for a very long time. If 40% of Lodi is Hispanic, and even the Hispanics in Lodi have become racist, this suggests to me that this is not a class issue at all. Castro Valdez says that many in the Hispanic community here are afraid to call police or don't believe it will result in help. But why would they want to call the police, given that they're racists? Aren't they the ones dealing out the injustice then, rather than suffering from it? So the Los Angeles Times managed to find a town, a small town in California, which has not given itself over to worship of Black Lives Matter. And of course, this must not stand. How dare they? How dare they? You know, Bertha Castro Valdez, I mean this in all honesty, if she really hates Lodi that much, if she really feels so out of place, if she really feels so unsafe, why doesn't she move to Stockton or Sacramento then, where there is so much more of the vaunted diversity that, you know, we just can't get enough of? Come on. I mean, Lodi is obviously, I mean, we've been told for decades now that the places that lack diversity, they're not places you want to live, because they lack all of these wonderful things. And there's, besides the homelessness and the poverty, I guess there's spicy ethnic food, but there's spicy ethnic food everywhere in the United States now. And again, one doesn't need very many diverse people to have spicy ethnic food. As I'm never tired of pointing out, we have sushi here in British Columbia, and we've had sushi for several decades. There has been no Japanese immigration to Canada since before the Second World War. There are a relative handful of Japanese descended people who live in Richmond, British Columbia, which is not far from where I am now. But yet we have sushi restaurants. How is that possible? Well, the people who run the sushi restaurants and prepare the sushi, they're either Chinese or Koreans. Just as when I was growing up, all of the pizza restaurants were owned and run by Greeks. But wait a minute, pizza's Italian food. It's not Greek food. This is, well, let's go to the chat before I start talking about the Great Reset. I'm getting kind of a ghostly visage here. I have decided to boycott S-Bucks, says Hikma Warrior. I don't know what that means, actually. Chogokin 666, he's obsessed with Spencer. Okay. No one be watching this stream for KMG's looks, says, is that Anrun? I could, you know, act as if I were terribly hurt by that remark, but it's true enough. Of course it's true. Okay, Anrun, like a very famous movie scene with Richard Widmark pushing an old woman in a wheelchair down some stairs. Yes, Richard Widmark, a great noir actor. Diversity is the health of the state, says Mike F. Well, it is the health of the state. As Oberon Waugh pointed out decades ago, people were talking about political correctness as if it was just some sort of joke. It was kind of cute. It is neither of those things. It is quite deliberate. It is quite serious. It is an attempt by governments and other authorities to negotiate diversity, to negotiate multiculturalism. You don't need to worry very much about microaggressions when you live in a country which is 97% white, which is the Canada that I grew up in as a child. When everyone looks the same as you and talks the same as you, you're not really going to have any racial problems, are you? DB Cooper says these people do nothing but lie and they think they are the good guys. Josh Randall laments, Lodi is a bummer, bros. Well, that's how John Fogerty's song had it. I read that LA Times story and I found myself warming to the place, I must say. DeBrea says, I can't see 5 million Americans voting for that lunatic, let alone 74 million. With any Democratic candidate, you're going to get the yellow dog effect. In the same way with any Republican candidate, you're going to get the yellow dog effect. But we're supposed to believe that this corrupt senile buffoon who basically didn't campaign for president is the most popular presidential candidate in history. Despite the fact that the media found it impossible. They tried their best to keep people from learning, say in the final week before the campaign, that he confused his granddaughter with his niece, and he confused both of them with his dead son, saying that these two young women had been a part of the effort that had elected his dead son, Beau, to the Senate, the U.S. Senate. Beau Biden was never a U.S. senator. That is to say that his mind is clearly gone. He's on video boasting about how he had set up the greatest voting fraud organization in the history of American politics. Now, of course, everyone makes these kinds of mistakes, but when you never stop making them, it proves that your mind is gone. Metatron says Lodi is nothing compared to Bakersfield. Bakersfield is meth disaster, says Josh Randall. Isn't that Victor Davis Hanson has written a lot about the agricultural areas in California, and he is quite gloomy, even damning about them, widespread drug abuse being one of the reasons. Contracoup says, interesting fact, Gorsuch, Barrett, and Kavanaugh were all lawyers on the Bush legal team during Bush versus Gore in 2000. Seems unlikely they would go against that decision. Trump could win. Well, we'll see you later, DeBrayes. Just stay the hell out of Fresno, says Ed McNeck. Are we going to go through all the towns of Central California and trash them now? I've never been to Central California. Yako Raipala, our Finnish friend, says, I haven't had this vibe about any presidential candidate since 20 years ago in Russia when they brought out Vladimir Putin on TV, and I understood that the fix is in. Wolf Barney says, growing up in an all-white community, you never thought about race. Diversity means it's all race all the time. Well, actually, I did think about a lot about race because, of course, American TV, with the race riots and the people being hosed and dogs set on them and the teachers getting us to sing Negro spirituals and Bob Dylan songs and all that sort of thing. It was just sort of an excuse to feel superior to the Americans. When I was in 7th grade, I had a best friend who's recently come from the United States, and I was constantly ragging him about, what they used to call the Negro question in America. And he took it pretty well. And finally, one day he exploded at me and he said, "You've never lived with these people. You don't know what they're like." And I thought at the time, what an outrageous thing to say. And I've thought about that conversation a lot in the decades since then. And I think, sorry, Steve, I was totally out of line. Okay, let's talk about the Great Reset. Never let a crisis go to waste. This is from Paul Joseph Watson at Summit News. In his book, COVID-19, The Great Reset, World Economic Forum globalist Klaus Schwab asserts that the world will never return to normal, despite him admitting that coronavirus doesn't pose a new existential threat. Breitbart's James Delingpole unveils how Schwab is even more explicit in his book about the elite's plan for exploiting the COVID pandemic than in his public statements. Schwab has continually pushed for COVID to be exploited to push for a new world order, claiming now is the historical moment of time, not only to fight the virus, but to shape the system for the post-corona era. However, he goes further in the book, making it clear that the financial elite will never allow life to return to normal, suggesting that rolling lockdowns and other restrictions will become permanent. Quote, "Many of us are pondering when things will return to normal. The short response is never. Nothing will ever return to the broken sense of normalcy that prevailed prior to the crisis, because the coronavirus pandemic marks a fundamental inflection point in our global trajectory," unquote. Schwab makes clear that the fourth industrial revolution of the Great Reset will fundamentally change how the world operates. Quote, "Radical changes of such consequence are coming that some pundits have referred to as before coronavirus and after coronavirus. We will continue to be surprised by both the rapidity and unexpected nature of these changes. As they conflate with each other, they will provoke second, third, fourth, and more order consequences, cascading effects, and unforeseen outcomes." As Delingpole explains, the Great Reset merely represents a repackaging of the old globalist agenda, which has been stuttering over the last decade. Namely, technocratic dictatorial rule by a tiny elite, the Green New Deal, the gradual abolition of private property, a guaranteed minimum wage that will see jobs replaced by robots, a crackdown on personal liberties, and curtailing freedom of movement. A senior U.S. Army official said that mask wearing and social distancing will become permanent, while CNN's international security editor, Nick Patton-Walsh, asserted that the mandatory wearing of masks will become permanent, just part of life, and that the public would need to come to terms with it, to which my response is, you and what army? Joe Biden announces COVID lockdown panel, plans mandatory mask mandate, lockdown, and contact tracing. But he said that he wasn't going to lock down the country. He was only going to lock down the virus. President Trump warned the public about Biden's radical agenda to lock down the country. This election is a choice between a Trump boom and a Biden lockdown, Trump said during a rally in Arizona. Biden actually said that he would lock down the U.S. if he were to win the election. Quote, "I would be prepared to do whatever it takes to save lives because we cannot get the country moving until we control the virus. In order to keep the country running and moving and the economy growing and people employed, you have to fix the virus. I would shut it down. I would listen to the scientists." And he goes to the scientists and say, okay, I want this on, a sheet of fool's cap here. How do I fix the virus? And of course, they would tell him that, well, the virus can't be fixed. Yeah, but can't we just sort of genetically re-engineer it or something like that? You might even ask a question like that. Biotech expert. COVID vaccine announcement was deliberately delayed until after the election. This is again from Summit News, Paul Joseph Watson. Yesterday, it was announced that a new vaccine developed by Pfizer and BioNTech had a 90% success rate in preventing people from getting coronavirus. Despite some skepticism over the rollout of the vaccine, some governments have suggested that it could be available as soon as next month if it gets fast-track approval. According to Barry Norris of Argonaut Capital Partners, an expert on the biotech sector, the announcement could have been made sooner and was likely delayed so that Trump couldn't take full credit. There are 44,000 people in the trial, with half in the placebo, he told lockdown skeptics. They were supposed to read out after just 32 cases in total. It was thought that the trial hadn't yet read out because they hadn't had enough infections. The trial actually read out after 94 cases, so they delayed it on purpose, apparently as a result of discussions with the FDA. This smells like they didn't want to announce it pre-presidential election in case the good news helped the incumbent. Trump must be fuming. But it's worse than that, because the announcement did come after the election, and no less than the love gov, dishing it 24/7, Andrew Cuomo of New York State, no, we can't have the virus. Well, why not? Well, because it's going to happen during the Trump administration. So he's going to screw it up somehow. Like, he screwed up everything. We can't give this to Trump. It's just absolutely outrageous. Now, I was informed that CNN had dropped the COVID death counter from its screen. So I thought that Biden's obviously a miracle worker, that COVID-19 is no longer a threat. But no, it's always going to be a threat, apparently, until the end of time, until the sun burns out. This is from NBC, Channel 4 in New York. This is our last chance. How many last chances have we been given over global warming? Didn't Gordon Brown announce that the world was going to come to an end like about 4 or 5 years ago? That was the message Monday from Mayor Bill de Blasio as he delivered yet another sobering report of New York City's latest metrics on the COVID front. His tone Tuesday didn't waver in urgency as he reviewed the same series of health indicators he does in each briefing. Unlike the summer, when de Blasio would applaud progress, his descriptors have changed to include phrases that include of tremendous concern and very worrisome. It's not difficult to grasp why. And there's more cases. How about that? More cases. Well, if you unlock down, you're going to get more cases because you can't fix the virus. Only an idiot would think that the virus can be fixed. It acts just like all the other viruses have done. The Centers for Disease Control have released guidelines for Thanksgiving celebrations as coronavirus cases once again surge in the United States. Small household gatherings. Okay. And are they making the same suggestion that they made hilariously in Britain? Yes. They're suggesting outdoor gatherings. The end of November is not a particularly pleasant time to be outdoors in, most of the United States. But they're asking people, this festive occasion, to consider the risk bases on some of the following factors. Community levels of COVID-19. Oh, what, are you going to plot a graph or something? Potential exposure during travel, location of gathering, indoor, outdoor, duration of gathering, number of people expected to attend, behaviors of attendees prior to gathering, behaviors of attendees during gathering. Why don't you just call the whole thing off then? William Briggs, statistician to the stars, writes, "It is with no pleasure that I announce we told you so. The panic juiced by the media and embraced with vigor by our uniparty elites succeeded. Mail-in ballots went out in tremendous number and were delightedly received by our rulers to do with what they would. The election is embroiled and the oligarchs have grown bold. The great reset, which these fine people desire, is now underway, leveraging the panic. They say this in their own words. Since the virus, like all viruses, is ebbing into the background to join the collection of bugs that forever besiege us, and there therefore being no need to fret, the resetters have to discover a way to keep the panic hot. They're doing this by falsely reporting surges in cases and by screaming about deaths with no context what the numbers mean. The proof of all this is below. Yes, and we see an explosion in the number of tests. And what do we see with deaths? Well, we see a flat line. In any event, the test also picks up asymptomatic and minor infections. None of these positive test indications are cases. The media and politicians call them cases, which is false. It is not true. It is wrong. It is a harmful, misleading lie. This cannot be overemphasized. A case is a person with a genuine infection who seeks and requires treatment. Most people who get the doom do not need treatment. And what do we got coming up in Canada here? Apparently, Ontario has its first honest-to-God concentration camp. Yeah, we've heard talk about this, in Manitoba, in Quebec, but in Ontario, yep, they got their own concentration camp. Justin Trudeau, Princess Rockstar, our Prime Minister, is, according to CTV News, citing concerning record-breaking spikes in the new COVID-19 cases across the country. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is imploring provinces not to keep sectors of the economy open if it's putting Canadians at risk, because, of course, being out of work doesn't put anyone at risk. Seeing your business fail forever, that doesn't put anyone at risk. And to reach out for more help from the federal government if they need it, because it's not necessary for people, to bring revenue to the government through working. The government can just borrow as much money as it wants forever. With rising cases of COVID-19 here at home, there are added pressure on all orders of government to keep people safe and to protect jobs. But I would hope that no leader in our country is easing public health vigilance because they feel pressure not to shut down businesses or slow down our economy, Trudeau said at a press conference in Ottawa on Tuesday. What Trudeau is saying here is that it's immoral to make risk assessments. Yeah, that is what he's actually saying. We don't want to balance possible risk to public health against the destruction of the economy. No. Because we never do that. Never, ever, ever, under any other circumstances. I understand that worry, but let me tell you, that's how we end up with businesses going out of business. Shut up. And the economy damaged even more. You have businesses going out of businesses because governments say that they are non-essential. Beating COVID is the only way to protect our economy. How long is it before COVID is going to be welcomed, boosting the GDP somehow? Job one right now is keeping people safe. Oh, yes, Dr. Theresa Tam, who is Canada's chief latrine walla, she's at it again. She's published a 2020 report from the Public Health Agency of Canada. It's an important document, potentially a revolutionary document. Why do I want revolutionary documents from public health authorities? From risk to resilience, an equity approach to COVID-19. Oh, so we're going to get communism? Everyone's going to be equal? It's based on a concept novel to most of us, quote, the health of Canadians is dependent on a set of fundamental social determinants, unquote. This is from Crawford Killian, who has been around forever. I went to his Twitter feed today, and it is just panic-stricken stuff about COVID-19, going pretty much state through state by the United States. In the United States, the number of cases. Now, I'm gathering that this fellow, he would appear to be in his, okay, here we go. He was born in New York City in 1941. That's 59, 79. He's 79 years old. So he is at risk for COVID-19. Yeah. If you're 50 or under, you have a 99.9% chance of surviving it, but Crawford Killian does not have anywhere near that. I believe he has something like about a 94.6% chance, but he is terrified of dying. Given that he has managed to live to the age of 79. This seems, I don't know, how would I put it, rather pathetic, rather cowardly. But no, I'm sorry, we don't need a second cultural revolution, this time not in China, but in Canada, and we don't need some Madame Mao telling us what we must and must not do. This is Patrick Brown. Patrick Brown was going to be the Premier of Ontario, and then something deeply weird happened. He was tossed out in a coup right before the Ontario election was called. And the reasons why he was tossed out, they don't make any sense, but he seems like a deeply weird fellow. He is now the mayor of Brampton on Ontario. He was very excited. Tweet yesterday at 7:49 p.m. tonight, our medical officer of health, Dr. Lawrence Loh, L-O-H, because we can't have any Canadians in these positions, received official confirmation Peel region will be receiving funding for an isolation center. We pushed, made noise, and got results. This will help our most vulnerable residents. Thank you, Patty Hajdu, who's the federal minister of health. An isolation center is a safe place to voluntarily isolate if positive with COVID-19. For many essential workers and those in precarious employment, crowded housing conditions and restrictive costs can make it impossible to self-isolate, increasing the risk of community transition. So they're going to self-isolate together, these people. And that's what's known as a concentration camp. But we're really moving forward by leaps and bounds in Canada. Oh, I talked about this yesterday, the double standard on people getting together in public as demonstrated in New York City. I thought I would talk, I came across an interesting report from Study Finds. The health benefits of taking multivitamin supplements may be all in the mind. According to a new study, people's positive expectations could be behind the benefits of multivitamin and mineral tablets, as there is no hard evidence otherwise, researchers suggest. A number of clinical trials have failed to find any measurable health benefits from taking vitamin or mineral supplements. That led Harvard University's Dr. Manish Paranjpe to examine whether the subconscious is behind health improvements among those taking the popular supplements. The effect of positive expectations in those who take multivitamin or mineral supplements is made even stronger when one considers the majority of them are sold to the so-called worried well, the doctor said in a statement. The multi-billion-dollar nature of the nutritional supplement industry means that understanding the determinants of widespread multivitamin or mineral use has significant medical and financial consequences. For the study, researchers collected data on 21,603 adults in the United States who took part in a 2012 National Health Interview study. Of the sample, 4,933 people reported taking multivitamin or mineral tablets regularly. I'm interested in this because I take multivitamins and other mineral tablets. Recent data regarding COVID-19 have demonstrated, several studies have demonstrated that apparently zinc and vitamin D is quite useful as a prophylactic against COVID-19. Of course, it could be the placebo effect, but the placebo effect, of course, has been found to be very popular. When I wrote about antidepressants, well, in the U.S. drug industry some years ago, I discovered that a large study had demonstrated that SSRIs are no more efficacious than St. John's wort or a placebo. Again, the placebo effect is important, it's popular, it's strong. I have been taking zinc for, 25 years, something like that. And I have found it has been very efficacious for me. It was suggested to me for a particular reason, problem that middle-aged men have. But I have found that since I started taking zinc, I don't get colds or flu anymore. This is not something that I was counting on, so the placebo effect would not work again, I am not a doctor, and I'm only speaking of my personal experience, but I have heard from others who have made the same claim that zinc is a prophylactic against coronaviruses like cold and flu. Does anyone have any thoughts in the chat? SSRIs can be extremely valuable for a subset of patients. Okay. Maybe it is all that zinc that is turning Kevin puce. That's a good one. There was a rage in the 1970s for vitamin K. Carrot juice. People went on carrot juice diets, and carrot juice is exceedingly high in vitamin K. And people who drank too much carrot juice would die in a couple of weeks of cirrhosis of the liver. That I knew a woman who was drinking a lot of carrot juice, and I saw she looked like she had hepatitis. She was turning yellow, orange, and I told her you might want to cut down on the carrot juice. Jay Smith says KMG, it has been known for a while now that zinc protects against cold. This knowledge just has not been as widespread as it should. Longnard says, I thought that zinc had trouble passing blood-brain barrier. Yeah, there's these arguments about that. That, vitamin D, just go out in the sunshine, and that use of tablets, you're not going to be able to absorb all of that much of it, and there's a limit to how much the body can absorb. As far as sunshine goes, in the part of the world I live in, there's not much of it around these days, and there's not going to be much of it around until, I don't know, April? No, I don't know. This regime that I employ, I don't know, 10, 15 years. I got all these things that I take. Again, might not be useful. My own experience has been that it has been. Mediaite says if you take too much vitamin, it will make you flush. Yes, I have read that. Anrun says I take zinc too, though not as regularly as a multi and C and D. I take a multi every day, and additionally, I take, what's this? C and D3 together at last. Also some other things. Too much vitamin A will kill you, says Yo Mama. I don't take an inordinate amount of it. If you're taking zinc, you should make sure you eat enough foods high in copper to prevent a deficiency. Well, again, I do take the multivitamin. Chokakin 666 says Eskimos got vitamin D from sucking on walrus. Yeah, deficiency. One thing that I can tell you about zinc, do not take zinc on an empty stomach. Don't do that, because it will make you feel pukey from quite some period of time. Metal Mike says Charlie Sheen sucked on a walrus runs. Crazy times. Chogakin 666, press 1 if you suffered from scurvy. There was this well-known fellow in Britain, something to showbiz, and he said that he'd gone on an all-meat diet, then he'd got scurvy, and I thought, this story is bogus. It's completely bogus, because fresh meat has been known to prevent scurvy from roughly 1800. And if he had, one would have thought that he would consult with a doctor, or at least, look it up. Should I go on an all-meat diet? What are the, what are the effects? Anyone who's worried about scurvy can simply, again, take a multivitamin or arrange for fresh meat or fruit juices, lemon, lime, that sort of thing. This is hard-won knowledge. This is hard-won knowledge of soldiers and explorers. Almond milk has lots of vitamin E. Almonds are bad for you, says Tom Anderson. Very high in polyunsaturated fatty acid. Yeah, you see, there was this fellow, I'm trying to remember this fellow I interviewed on my podcast. He gives advice about a diet and weightlifting. I'm sure people know who I'm talking about. And it was kind of an eye-opener for me because, some years ago, I bought this collection, unrestored. It's called like 1001 TV commercials going back to the 1950s. And they're going on about fat, how bad fat is. Fat, oh, no, you don't want fat. And it turns out that fat is good for you. Yeah, P.D. Mangan, that's the fellow. For close to, half a century, pretty much everything we were told about diet by the experts was wrong and dangerously wrong. But KMG, that's simply wrong. Meat does not contain meaningful amounts of vitamin C. That is not what Roald Amundsen found in both the Arctic and Antarctic. Fresh meat and at the end, fresh dog meat was used to prevent scurvy, unlike Scott's expedition, which subsisted on biscuit and the like, and they all became horribly sick of scurvy. Okay, that is the, yes, why do they call the Brits limeys? Yes, it comes from the British Navy, because Captain Cook, and I live in a part of the world where many things are named after Captain Cook, he discovered, empirically, how to prevent scurvy. Vitamins were not synthesized until the early 20th century, and for the longest time, deficiency diseases, let's say the medical profession was completely wrong about deficiency diseases for hundreds of years. But that is the show for today. I'll be back on the air tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. It's a funny thing doing this show that often, when I start at 4 o'clock, I find it a bit of a struggle. And I'm not so facile in my speech. And the longer I go on with each show, the easier it becomes. I suppose there might be a way for me to be that facile at the beginning. I don't know, by spending 5 or 10 minutes simply talking to myself or reading off a screen, something like that. What's coming up culture-wise? On Theater Thursday, I am going to be discussing a comedy from Robert Zemeckis, 1988, Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And on the book club, I am going to be discussing a book called Stanley Kubrick, American Filmmaker, by David Mickish. I'm going to pronounce his name that way. I just finished it today, and I think that it is excellent. It's full of insights. It taught me things about Kubrick that I do not know, and I look forward to talking about it on Friday. I just, on December 11th, I'm going to be discussing the 3 novels that Louis Ferdinand Céline wrote about his experiences as a German collaborator during the Second World War, North Castle to Castle and Rigadoon. And I'm reminded that Stanley Kubrick, who was Jewish, he quite liked Céline's writing. He called him my favorite anti-Semite. If you like the show or any part of it, I'd appreciate it if you click on the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you have not already done so. If you would like to support this live stream with a donation, very much appreciated at this time. You can do so through PayPal. My account is attached to Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. Once again, Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. If you're Canadian, you can send money, a donation, directly through Interac at kevingrace@shaw.ca. And I shall leave you with this. In these days of social atomization and civilizational collapse, I do dearly wish that you, my dear listeners and viewers, manage to find some genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.